Hello there, Pursuing Freedom friends. Thanks as always for tuning in. If you're a repeat offender, thanks for coming back and listening to the show. I've got something pretty unique here today. And if you're new to the podcast, then buckle up and get ready for a great show. I have a guest here today named Jordan Berry. And I'm going to start by prefacing this that Jordan is a podcast host and host of one of the top 1% of podcasts worldwide. And I'm going to hold off on telling you the name of the podcast here for a moment because I've been running this podcast since 2018. And initially, I shared that we were always focused only on how to build and scale your real estate business because the goal is to build a life you don't need a vacation from, right? So we're trying to build businesses, our real estate business, mortgage business, et cetera, in such a way that it fuels an epic life rather than having our success rob us of our energy, enthusiasm, ability to be present with loved ones. Because if you know my story, I've experienced broke and burnout, and I felt that the stress on both ends of the spectrum was challenging. And what I'm passionate about is helping people design your life, right? Design a business that is authentic to you, that you love, you enjoy, it's predictable, you can create income for yourself. And then what do you do with that income? And so after taking a 6-month hiatus from the podcast, maybe longer, I guess it was almost a year, and resuming the podcast recently, I'm coming armed with some new material for everybody because what I've learned in my group coaching programs is that many of us get to a stage where generating income is no longer the challenge. It's no longer the bottleneck. We've attended enough trainings. We've pushed through the comfort zone. We know how to develop relationships, nurture them, earn income. And in the real estate space, the opportunity to earn at a high level is there for you for the taking. And what I've found in some of my high level mastermind groups is that we get to a crossroads where sometimes we start to feel a little bit bored or maybe burned out. Like we know what to do. We know how to find opportunities. We know how to build that database. And then what, right? And through my own journey, I've been lucky enough to connect with some investors that have educated me to a point, like I said to Jordan before the call, that my brain just started to be cracked wide open. Because as a mortgage lender, it was natural for me to start down the journey of real estate investing the old school way of just buy and hold. We were lucky enough to accidentally keep our first home in 2010 as a rental property. And that became the beginning of a journey of buying real estate, living in it, keeping it until we were ready to upgrade and buying just what we need and nothing more. And those properties then became the catalyst for my husband to be able to retire early from his W-2 in 2016, and for me later to retire from mine in 2022. But what I'm learning through this community of investors is that there's so many other interesting ways to take your active income and turn it into passive. And so this is a long intro here because this is my very first time bringing on a guest who is not a real estate agent, and real estate was potentially part of his freedom journey. And in fact, he pivoted and he went the direction of laundromats. Yes, we've never had anybody on the Pursuing Freedom podcast talking about laundromats, but here's why I have Jordan on the call, because I'm thinking to myself, if you could find creative ways to turn your active income into passive and truly create your path to financial independence where work becomes optional, can you imagine how much more fun you'd have inside your business if you weren't operating from a place of needing money, needing deals, needing clients, and you could just go out there, enjoy life, add value, create opportunities, grow your real estate business, and then just have a good time? Well, Jordan's done that, and he has an incredible story for us. And the ability to leverage the laundromat space to catapult your way to financial independence is mind-blowing. So I think you're going to have a fun time with this one, listeners. And so with no further ado, with the longest intro ever, let's bring Jordan onto the stage here and have you, Jordan, please introduce yourself, share your story. How the heck did you find yourself not only in the laundromat space, but also the top 1% of podcasts worldwide with the Laundromat resource, which is also the name of your coaching organization, where you train people how to find laundromat deals and buy, acquire, optimize, scale, et cetera. I'm really excited to dig in and learn from this process.
Yeah, well, I mean, should we just wrap it up right there? That was a great podcast episode in and of itself right there. It's amazing.
I know,
Well,
but this is so unique. I'm like, I just needed to like get the listeners fired up because they're
get
gonna
them
be like,
pumped.
what laundromats? What are you talking about, Aaron? Like, we talk real estate here. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, but this I'm kind of nerding out here myself. So I'm here like I'm ready to hang up and go buy a laundromat just from getting to know Jordan myself. So come on, let's dig in. Tell us everything. How'd you get into this
Yeah.
business? What did your journey look like? And how are you helping people do the same nowadays?
Awesome. Well, just so you know, my goal for this podcast interview is to not help but exacerbate your shiny object syndrome and convince you to buy a laundromat by the end of this. So that's my goal. No, thanks for having me on. Super excited to be here. Got a quick nap in during that intro, so I'm ready to go. Energized, fired up. And now I'm going to bring us back down because my story in the laundromat space does not start off well. And so we'll dig into that. But real quick, as background, I was a pastor for almost 15 years, youth pastor and pastor for almost 15 years, and got to a point where I was ready to transition out of that, doing that as a job, and was trying to figure out what in the world I should do with my life. And it was a little bit of like a crisis for me, but I had this great idea, which was we live here in Southern California. My wife, I had 2 young kids at the time. This was almost a decade ago now, just about. And I said, hey, why don't we rent out our house here in Southern California and let's take the money we've got saved up in the bank and let's go buy a condo on the beach in Hawaii. And, I don't know, sell jewelry or who cares, whatever, while we're living in Hawaii, right? And if we want to come back when our kids are school age, we've got that house to come back to, net gain, condo on the beach in Hawaii, right? We could rent that out. I thought that was a great idea. And my wife said we could do that, or we could buy a laundromat. To this day, I have yet to own a condo anywhere near the beach in Hawaii, but I have owned laundromats. And the way that came about, which it's so random. There still are many times in my life where I look around, I'm like, how did I get here? It's so random. But a friend of my wife's family had a son who was working a high-tech job in the San Francisco Bay Area. And he was working 78 hours a week and 80 hours a week and making good money. But I mean, that's a lot of hours to work, right? And so he ended up buying a laundromat, replacing his income, and was working 5 hours a week. And we were like, like that sounds pretty attractive, right? And this was before we knew nothing about real estate investing. We knew nothing about business ownership. We knew nothing about really anything, if I'm honest. And cash flow, foreign concept, never heard of it. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, never heard of it at this point, right? And we just kind of stumbled into this and we're like, yeah, it just makes a lot of sense, right? To try to buy something that's going to make money, but free up time. We got young kids, want to spend time at home more, yada, yada, yada. And so we went down that path, and this was, again, like almost a decade ago, and there really wasn't a lot of information out there on laundromats at the time, on how to buy them, how to value them, what due diligence looks like, how to run them properly. There was really just no information out there at all. And so I relied almost entirely on one of the 2 people who stood to gain from me buying a laundromat. And, the 2 people being the owner and the person I relied on, which is the broker. And it just turned out that the broker that I stumbled on did not have my best interest in mind and sold me a pipe dream, right? Sold me a story of, buying this business, not having to do anything ever except come collect quarters once a week and, swim in them like Scrooge McDuck in my vault or whatever. Right. And it didn't turn out that way. And partially it was because, I'm here in LA. This is in a really rough neighborhood. This was what we call in the industry a zombie mat, big time fixer upper. There was, a lot of stuff going on there that I didn't know about until after the fact. And so I just had no idea what I was walking into. And, going back, the dream was money coming in, not a whole lot of time invested, how it worked out for us was a whole lot of time spent at that laundromat, working on that laundromat, working in that laundromat. And I was losing money, lots of money, thousands of dollars every month for a couple years. And so that is my entry into the laundromat. I'll pause there.
You're making it sound really sexy for us listeners here.
Yeah. I'm really
Like,
setting it up.
Just
Real
really
good.
can't wait to go out there and throw away all my money.
Yeah.
Okay, so talk to us about, there had to be a turning point, and I'm curious too, because I know that now you teach other people how to obviously, hopefully, do better than you did, which is also my story. I don't know if you know, but I also fell flat on my face and crawled around on the floor for many years before I figured things out myself. So that's why we do what we do, right? Is to help other people avoid the same mistakes that we made. So
Yeah.
talk to us about when things turned around and what did that look like for you?
Yeah. I would love to, but I can't yet because I bought another one thinking I had learned all the mistakes there were to learn. I was not going to make them again. And turns out I hadn't learned all the mistakes. And so bought another one, seller financed, which was awesome, with the real estate, which is awesome. And I do have some real estate, and I did actually have, all right, I still do, I think technically have my real estate license. So, I'm solidarity here going on with everybody. But bought that second one, and due to just some on the seller side, there was some personal stuff going on. Our escrow ended up being 6 months long. Long story short, I did due diligence up front. I didn't redo due diligence on the back end. And because of that, the day I took over, another large brand new laundromat opened up. The day I took over, a half a mile from the business I bought. And I checked for that on the front end, but in the 6 months that they were trying to get everything figured out, a new one was constructed. So immediate 40% loss of income, and I was still losing money at the other one. But the one thing that I did right was I bought the real estate with it, commercial real estate, and I bought it with some equity in that real estate. And so that ended up keeping me afloat for a little while until things finally did turn around there. And what's funny is, starting off the story of like, hey, you should buy a laundromat, with like, hey, I probably lost over 6 figures in owning laundromats early on. I feel like, on the one hand is not really making it sound very sexy, like you said, but on the other hand, there's got to be something to it if I'm still here saying, I think you should buy a laundromat. And I think it's probably one of the best ways for you to achieve financial freedom, and one of the quickest ways to achieve financial freedom, as long as you don't do it the way I did it. Right. And so, talking about turning it around, I mean, essentially, I spent a lot of money on that first one, rehabbing the place, putting new equipment in, new flooring, yada, 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 all the stuff, remodeling. I spent $0 rehabbing the reputation of that laundromat. And, like I said, there was like gang activity going on in there, drug activity going on in there. And the community just knew it as a place that wasn't safe to go to. And like, who's doing laundry? Well, a lot of times it's moms with young kids who are coming in. Are they going to come in if there's gang members hanging out? No, but the previous owner, let that stuff happen. And so it took time, number one, to get all of them out. And then it took time to sort of rehab the reputation and for people to feel safe to come back there. And I wasn't doing that. I wasn't proactively communicating to people like, hey, it's safe to come back. New management, things are different now. And so it took a couple years of just slowly and consistently keeping things running well, keeping everything clean, keeping all the machines working, keeping the wrong people out. And eventually word got around, and eventually new people moved into the neighborhood and came and tried it out. And eventually it turned around. But I didn't do any marketing because I was scared money was going out. I didn't want to put any more money out. All the wrong things.
And just out of curiosity, I have a couple questions. How important is your physical proximity to the laundromats? Because we were talking beforehand, and it's funny, I live in a really small town, and one of our buddies bought a laundromat with a couple rental properties above it. And I asked him one time, we were skiing, I'm like, so what's the deal? I'm like, is this just amazing? Do you just like collect money? And he's like, it's awesome. He's like, it's like going to the slots machine, gambling and winning every time. He's like, you're just collecting money. And I'm like, whoa, that sounds cool. And funny enough, in my early 20s, I lived in Barcelona for a couple years, and a friend of mine had come over to Barcelona, and he and his girlfriend actually bought a laundromat in Barcelona. And I believe they still live there today, 20 years later, because it was so successful that they went on to do a few more. You mentioned that half-mile radius as a detriment, which doesn't surprise me. So I'm just kind of curious, like, what's the deal with that? I mean, do you like to be physically near your establishments? Number one. Number two is, what is the distance that you can feel safe that it's going to be monetized and cash flow well?
Yeah. So the general advice is to be relatively close to your laundromat for your first one, especially. Now, I still think that's the best way to go, probably. And what I mean by relatively close, probably 30 to 45 minutes. But really it comes down to this. Like if you had to go there, what's the furthest you're willing to go? Weekly or whatever, especially early on while things are getting set up. What's the furthest you're willing to go? And that's your answer, right? If you're willing to drive 2 hours every week each way, then 2 hours is your answer, but probably 30 to 45 minutes. However, I will say that now more than any other time in history, it is easier to own further away and even more remotely in certain circumstances. If you have two things in place. Number one, you have the right people in place, and you probably don't want a minimum wage employee managing your business, running your business, right? So you might have some near minimum wage employees, like cleaning the place, maybe doing wash and fold, something like that. But if you're going to be sort of remote, you want at least that sort of next tier person, manager type there that's going to help you run that business. And then number two, so people, number one, and number two is technology, right? So digital payment systems, we're finally getting some decent digital payment systems where you can pay with loyalty cards or credit cards or Apple Pay. And that makes it easier. You don't have to trust somebody to go collect quarters and cash and stuff like that. And you're not sure if they're robbing you, that kind of thing, right? It's easier to keep track of everything. So good people, the right seats and the right technology setup, and you can own further away, but it's probably still better if you own closer to home for that first one, so you can really learn the business, understand what you're doing, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things I want to touch upon here is that, you talked about knowing nothing about investing or cash flow, and you talked about not having read Rich Dad Poor Dad. And so for anyone listening, Rich Dad Poor Dad is a very well-known book. And for me, when I went into the mortgage business in 06, and then I went 100% commission in 07, my manager gave me that book. And it was the first book that I had ever read that was truly a business book. And I talk a lot about business books, self-help, spiritual, all kinds of things on this podcast. And he said, congratulations. And I can't remember if they mentioned this in Rich Dad Poor Dad or if it was only in Cash Flow Quadrant, but he's in the books, he has this quadrant, Robert Kiyosaki, where E is for employee, E is for employee, and S is for self-employed. And then on the other side of it, basically a T is B for business and I for investor. And he said, congratulations, you just moved from E to S. And if you look at the cash flow quadrant, if you Google that, you'll see that E for employee is trade your time for money. And S for self-employed is trade your time for money. And that's what's so interesting, because he's like, now you have to get over to B and I, which is where B is where your business makes money. And that is thanks to systems and people. So when Jordan says people and technology, that's a huge piece of what we teach inside of our courses is you've got to have a system that runs the business and then have people in place to run the system. Otherwise, if you're just a solopreneur and you intend to stay that way, you will always be trading your time for money. And eventually it does get tiresome, especially when you start to achieve levels of success, maybe far exceeding what you ever expected for yourself. You're going to notice that you're almost surviving your own success. And then I is where your money makes money for you. And so you talk about knowing nothing about about investing in cash flow. And this is why I had you on the show, is that it's almost like there's these hidden secrets out there. Like I've been learning about investing in ATMs, like money machines and car washes and, passively in commercial buildings. And it feels like I'm tapping into this like secret world of information where the true path to freedom lies. And I love that you shared the story and, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because honestly, it's never a straight line. Let's be real. And to say that you had your sweat equity to earn your now freedom would be an understatement. And you figured it out. But the fact of the matter is now you're here to tell the story of how it's working out for you. And it's always worth it. Like your biggest risk became your smartest decision. And so what I love about you saying earlier that there's not a lot of info out there for when you got started, I'm just curious, what inspired you to go from, okay, thank God this is finally working out. You're really experiencing financial freedom. And now you're teaching others how to do it. What inspired you to say, okay, I'm going to be the guy that helps other people figure this out, because I didn't have anybody helping me figure it out. And it resulted in a lot of failure in the beginning.
Yeah. So funnily enough, it was, while I was, working, cleaning the laundromat at night and stuff, I was listening to podcasts, a lot of real estate investing podcasts, a lot of audio books, business, personal development books, stuff like that. And, I really got on the financial freedom through real estate investing train. And I was like, yes, I'm all about it. Started looking at single family rentals and stuff. And then at some point I was like, wait, if I'm going to get like $200 a door, like how many houses do I have to own for freedom? Like I don't even need a lot of income, but still a lot of houses. Right. And, one of the things that's interesting, I realized is that, if with just a base hit laundromat deal, not a home run deal, just a base hit laundromat deal, 99% of Americans can replace their income with 1 to 3 laundromats. And it really hit me that I had like just stumbled upon, like you said, kind of this hidden gem that was out there. And obviously I stumbled into it and, and tripped up early on, but I still saw the power of it. That's why I bought the second one, even before I was out of the red in the first one. Cause I was like, I know this works. And, I was looking around and seeing other people really have a lot of success. And so, your question is, why did I start to, be the guy? Why I didn't really set out for that. What I did was I was like, man, I just learned like 6 figures worth of hard lessons. And there are other people that I've now talked to who've had similar experiences. Nobody will ever have to learn those lessons the way that I learned them. As long as I can help it. Right. And so I started writing down my lesson. That turned into like a blog on, Laundromat Resource blog. And then I was like, man, writing's really hard. It takes a long time. I'm just going to do YouTube videos. That's way better. And so then that's the Laundromat Resource YouTube channel. And, it's a little laundromat. I'm not one of those like fun laundromat channels where I'm like showing you collecting all my quarters and stuff. Cause I'm really just trying to help people get into the business. So I'm telling like nuts and bolts. And it's not super entertaining like some of the other like TikTokers and stuff like that. But, we've got over 20,000 subscribers on, on that YouTube channel. We get 40,000 plus page views on the blog every month. But then I was like, well, I started seeing good response from the blog and from the YouTube channel. And I was like, well, if I really want to help people, I should probably talk to the best people in the business. Right. And I kind of half joke, although if I'm like real honest, I'm not sure if I'm actually joking, but like I was the world's worst laundromat owner. Right. And when I got into it, and I was like, I should talk to the people who are doing really good. And so that turned into the podcast. Right. And so I started interviewing laundromat owners and then other industry professionals in the business and asking them like, what do you do? How are you running your business? How are you buying laundromats? How are you operating these things to be successful? And partly it was because I wanted to just improve my own businesses. And then partly because, there's it's been a very closed mindset industry for a very long time. And I was going head on towards that at this point. I was like, this is hindering us. Like when people think about laundromats, they think dingy, dark, nobody wants to be there, like run down, right? That's what people think of. And it's I think in large part because that closed mindset. And I was like, we need to start sharing best practices. We need to start telling each other how we can improve our businesses and have this abundance mindset, so that our businesses can be better, so that we can serve our communities better, and so that our industry has a better reputation too. So that turned into the podcast, and it just sort of happened. I wasn't like out to be, the guy or anything like that. It just sort of happened that way.
Well, it's interesting that you share that because so many of the things you said are just fundamentally best practices. In fact, you talked about how you went out and found the people that were doing it well when you didn't consider yourself the expert. I literally just had a conversation on a coaching call this morning where we talked about how in the mortgage space right now, there are people struggling as we're recording this. And I said, don't hang around the people that are struggling. There are people that are killing it right now. And what you want to do is find out who they are and then go spend time with them, because with an abundance mindset, you do elevate through association. And that's fundamental in any business that you're in. So kudos to you for number one, sticking it out, which again, as we're recording this, the real estate market is experiencing a different economy than it had been for many years. And some of the listeners got into the business while the wave was going well, and now they're experiencing change and they have to figure out how to navigate this turbulent water. But those who do and those who stay with it are going to come out on top. And more importantly, keeping the future on the horizon, which is the why. Like, why did you get into this business? Was it so that you could trade all your time for money indefinitely? Or was it because you saw freedom and flexibility? And then the question I always ask people is, how's that working out for you? Like, does it feel like freedom and flexibility when you're stressed out about money? Probably not. Does it feel like freedom and flexibility when you're working 24/7? Not really. So you've got to be willing to learn and grow and expand. And you were listening to podcasts and reading books. And, the interesting thing is it's just such a similar journey to how I got to having a podcast, was because I was like, how can I help more people avoid the mistakes that I made? And how can I collaborate with people that represent what I consider building a life you don't need a vacation from, powered by this industry? So I just love, like, there's just so much there that's transferable from a mindset perspective and from a business development perspective. Is keep going, hang around people that represent the future you want for yourself. And then more than anything, don't just do it because it might be good for you, because sometimes I think servant-hearted people have a hard time pursuing something that feels self-serving. And what I like to help people understand is that with every new challenge that you overcome, with every risk you take that turns out to be a smart decision, with every success that maybe was preceded by failure, you have an opportunity to help somebody else. And as a real estate agent or a mortgage lender, real estate professional in any capacity, as you start to build out your own path to financial independence, you get to help more people do it as well. And that's a beautiful thing. So talk to us a little bit about what you do now. I mean, I know you've got the laundromats and that's kind of set you guys up. And now you're in the giving back phase and you provide some education. So can you share a little bit about how you teach people and how they can get a hold of you and learn more?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously laundromatresource.com is sort of the hub of everything. The podcast, you can get there, or any podcast platform or whatever, YouTube, all the social media, all that stuff. There's a ton of free information out there. Right. And I recommend you check some of that out, for sure. Cause you're going to learn a ton about the business. When things get a little more serious and, if you decide, hey, this is like a path that I'm really interested in thinking about going down, here, a couple different things that we have to just kind of help people. And like I said, you just need a base hit. And, I didn't mention this, but just to kind of give a little bit of context for a laundromat, you're looking like a base hit average deal. You're looking at like a 20 to 25% return on your investment if you buy it all cash. And if you use a loan, those numbers go up even higher. And so you can see how when you're getting returns that high, which is hard to get anywhere else, frankly, when you're getting returns that high, you can achieve that financial freedom a lot quicker. Right. But the caveat to that is that, you've got to buy it correctly the first time. And one difficulty in this industry is that by and large, most laundromats are still cash businesses. And which can be a good thing, but it also can make it difficult to verify the performance of the business, right? And to do proper due diligence and to know exactly what you're getting before you close on that deal. And my story is a perfect example of that, right? Where I had no idea what I was walking into. So a couple of options that we have. So number one, we have a course that not only is the accumulation of all of my personal experience buying and operating laundromats, but I've been a broker here for laundromats in California for a few years now, and so I pull in on all that knowledge from the broker side, and then I do tons of consulting calls, which I'll talk about in a second. I'm doing like 10 to 15 a week for the last few years, consulting calls, and so I'm analyzing deals all the time. And talking with owners about operations. And then also I'm talking to the best people in the business, and I'm personal friends with the biggest names in the business. Right. And so I'm pulling all this information into this course. Right. But then also we've developed, some tools to help me personally and my fund, which we can talk about, to acquire laundromats. And those are included in that course. So all the knowledge and all the tools you need to, make sure you buy that laundromat right the first time is there in that course. And then, if you want to talk one-on-one with me or somebody on the consulting team, you can do that also. So let's do this. Laundromatresource.com/freedom. And you can that'll have links to everything that you want there, to the podcast, to the course, to the consulting, all that stuff will be there. And we'll make sure it's worth it for your listeners to head over there and click on that link.
Cool. I love it. I mean, at a minimum, like with everything, is when you're curious, start learning. So I know personally, I love finding podcasts that speak to the stage of life I'm at or the crossroads I'm exploring. And I'm just personally so blown away by what I've learned in the last few years around the ways to diversify in the journey towards financial independence. And I'm so passionate about helping others get access to this information that for me, it just seems like, how did I not know about this? How do we not, how do more people not know about Laundromat Resource? So I really appreciate you, Jordan. I love your story. Thank you so much for taking the time to share. And besides laundromatresource.com/freedom, any other places they can find you, social media, follow you, Instagram, etc.?
Yeah, all the social media is at Laundromat Resource, except I think Twitter, which we're Laundry Resource. I don't know why that happened, but all the other ones, Laundromat Resource. And then my email, Jordan, Jordan, DAN, excuse me, at laundromatresource.com too, if you want to just shoot me an email.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And to all my Pursuing Freedom friends, I hope you enjoyed this unique episode. I feel personally inspired. I'm like, maybe I need a laundromat in my portfolio. So thanks for tuning in as always. And if you are enjoying the content you're finding here at Pursuing Freedom, don't forget to leave that 5-star review wherever you're consuming it. It helps us continue to attract these amazing guests with all this valuable content to help you on your journey to building a life you don't need a vacation from. I love you. I appreciate you. I'll see you next time.